Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is the Public Affairs Roundtable that's hosted every month by the Williamson County Chamber of Commerce. And we're glad to have all of you here in the audience and on the TV audience with us this morning. We have a special guest this morning. Our guest today is Congressman Marsha Blackburn, and we're excited to spend a few minutes with her and understand a little bit about what's going on in Washington, maybe in a little more depth than she has an opportunity to share in most venues. So just as a matter of introduction, to make sure we understand, I tend to forget how we know Marsha and when we first got to know Marsha, but I first learned about Marsha when I was in college, and I was selling books on the field with Southwestern Company, and the name at the top of the honor roll list every week was either Marsha Wedgeworth or Chuck Blackburn. And so my memories of her go way back. And she became our state senator in 1998 here in this district, and went on to become our congressman in 2002, and we're proud to have her representing us in Congress since 2002. As I attended the breakfast with the mayors a few weeks ago, I learned a little bit more about how she is involved in Washington, and I like to share that because it's something I didn't quite appreciate until I heard her speak, and that's that she is the vice chairman of the, let me get this right, Energy and Commerce Committee in Congress, which gives her a lot of leverage for our district and a little insight into some things that maybe we'd like to understand more fully. So let's keep that in mind as we talk to her and find out a little bit more about that. So in general, what's going on in Washington?
Well, what is going on in Washington right now is a lot of back and forth. And, you know, you hear so much about the partisan bicker that is there, but I think that it is instructive just to know and to realize that there are so many issues that we are working on in a bipartisan manner. And some of those are involved in the Energy and Commerce Committee, because our jurisdiction there at the committee, of course, we cover energy and energy policy. We cover commerce, manufacturing, and trade, which has a tremendous impact on the jobs picture in this country. Healthcare comes under us. So we are dealing with all of the constraints and pressures and missed deadlines that are coming forward with the Obamacare bill. We deal with telecommunications and the internet, which means all of your interactive technologies come before us. We also handle auto manufacturing, we handle pro sports. So you can see so much of the economic underpinning that is here in Middle Tennessee comes before our committee. Now, as to what is going on in Washington before our committee, I have legislation that I'm working through that deals with the mobile medical apps. And you all know, and Matt can tell you, we've got, and probably Brad too, from the chamber members, we have so many companies here in Williamson County that are in healthcare informatics and are dealing with the applications. Verizon has a big center where they're doing some of the 4G, 5G research right over in Cool Springs. So we have bipartisan support on a discussion draft that would prohibit the FDA from regulating mobile medical applications, what you have on your iPhone and your iPad, as a medical device, because in search of another revenue stream, and as you expect government to do, if it is moving, they regulate it. If it is producing, they tax it. And so what they're seeking to do is to regulate these devices, these applications as devices, so they can then tax it as a device. And they would tax the app or the software that goes on the phone, and then the phone as a device, or the iPad as a device. And I was over in Hardeman County meeting with some home health providers. And of course, so much of what they do, so much of what is done in our federally qualified health centers out in many of our rural counties is done through remote monitoring and through telemedicine concepts. So what you're looking at is increasing that cost 2.3 or 4.6% just because of the application of a tax. So see, we have bipartisan agreement on some of those areas. We have bipartisan agreement on dealing with the FCC, keeping the federal government from regulating the internet and application of net neutrality rules. Much of what has happened with Obamacare, with the delays and the 2 bills that the president has signed to repeal portions of Obamacare, we have had bipartisan support on that. So that is good, and it is healthy. We're going to face, when we go back in September, the continuing resolution. We will face the debt ceiling. We're continuing to look at the overreach of regulation, and there are those of us that want to reduce some of the 291,000 regulatory agency employees that are absolutely making the life of small business and our domestic manufacturers miserable, and the IRS that is out of control. We also are dealing with the situations that we are seeing in the Middle East. You have Egypt, Syria, Pakistan, where we are quite concerned about some of the pressures there. And of course, you all, so many of you have been so wonderful to help us in supporting Fort Campbell, and that is at the north end of our district. And we're quite concerned for our men and women in uniform and the rotations that are there, the National Guard and the rotations that are there, and how this may end up having an effect on them. So those are kind of the, jobs, the economy, Obamacare, energy, the security issues, the scandals are really the top issues in D.C.
Right. It surprisingly enough, there is some bipartisan support for something in Washington. I didn't know that, and I'm most happy to hear it. And I realized that I forgot introductions for our other 2 guest hosts this morning, and Brad and Matt, I'm sorry for that. Our other 2 gentlemen up here with us this morning, Brad Dunn, the chairman of the Williamson County Chamber, and Matt Largin, the president of the Williamson County Chamber. Gentlemen, any general questions for the congressman this morning to get things rolling?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. And Congressman, thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate it. I know this isn't early for you, but it sure is for me. So thanks for getting up so early for us. And also thanks for so much the work you've done in economic development for the county and for your district too. It's been tremendous. You're always there when we call on you, and I can't tell you how much that means to us and how much it means to the people we work with who are trying to relocate in the area. I know we kind of talked specifically with Dave's question, some of the things happening in D.C. I'd like to take it up a level and talk, just ask some very general questions about what life is like in D.C. And I guess the first question is, what is the biggest philosophical divide these days between the 2 political parties?
And that is a great question, because that is where so much, when people think we're in gridlock and things are running off the rails, that is where it is. And last week, when we had those that were for Obamacare and those that were against Obamacare at my office, they came to kind of do a little rally, and I went out and met with them, and I said, this is a philosophical divide, and a great example. There are those that want more D.C. federal government control over everything that is taking place in our lives. And there are those of us that want a smaller centralized government and want to send the power back to the state and local governments. And we want less government control over our lives. And, you know, you can see the difference that it's make. Looking out in the audience, I see our state electeds that are here, and I have to tell you, I think that our state delegation is doing such a great job. Our state is doing such a great job, and they are getting things done. Tennessee is at the top of every ratings list that there is for doing business, quality of life, cost of living, tax rate, and it's because we have people that are committed to getting things done. And then you look at our vice mayor over here and the county mayor and different elected officials that have stepped in, and you see people that are committing to getting things done. And of course, for us, we're a part of that team. And I think that Williamson County is so fortunate that we have a good, strong, committed team. And when we get to the federal level, and most everybody is on the same page, and then of course we go with that conservative structure of government to DC, and what we are faced with is those that say, no, let's centralize, let's federalize, let's control from the top down. And I think government is strongest and best, government that is closest to you, that you can see, that you can put your hands on and work with. So that is the core of the philosophical divide there. Bigger government, smaller government, more control, less control, centralized, decentralized, and it works up and down through every issue.
Good. And kind of following up on that, what have you noticed is the biggest change from your first term in Washington to your current term, just in terms of the environment?
In terms of the environment, from the first term until now, I think that what you see is, going back to Dave's question, there is less of a willingness from some members of Congress to work with us to get things done. And sometimes we'll have a member who we will go to and say, will you work with us on this legislation? And they say, oh, sure. And then we get with their staff, and we know that the leadership on the other side has put the kibosh on it because they won't come work with us. I had and this is a great example of that. I had a bill that was dealing with some EPA issues, and I noticed that a colleague from across the aisle had filed a very similar bill to mine, very similar wording, just changed a couple of words. And so I went to them and I said, I noticed that you filed this bill. I would love to have you join me on this, and let's make it a bipartisan effort. Well, that was about 3 months ago. And on the floor, that member had said, sure, be happy to. And then their staff never came back to do it. And I would love to have that reigning in the EPA as a bipartisan issue, because it's jobs. It's good policy that would be good for the American people and good for our small business manufacturers, all of our tool and die pressers, those that are just-in-time suppliers to the auto industry. We want to make those parts here, not import those parts.
Absolutely. Brad, what's on your top of your mind this morning?
Yeah, well, a few things. First of all, I wanted to thank Congressman Blackburn for being here this morning. It's great to have this sort of open and kind of I'd say relaxed format. I mean, there's a lot of time. We're not, peppering her with questions, and so this is a great time, hopefully, for those here and on TV to kind of get a feel for what's really going on. The second thing I'd say is, I think for those of you who have followed the Public Affairs Roundtable, Dave, I just think you've kind of solved your problem of figuring out who's Brad and who's Matt by inviting us both here, so we're that's the way to solve a problem.
You need to watch the show about 4 months ago.
I know.
That's an inside joke.
That's very much an inside joke, and I apologize for that. However, one of the things I was going to talk about, and just based on kind of what I see and hear from my clients every day, working with a lot of business owners, and then thinking about the 90+% of chamber members that are business owners, the Obamacare topic, if we can say maybe come back from 30,000 feet, maybe down to 10,000 feet, and talk about that issue a little bit. First question is just sort of how would you sort of describe the current situation, where that stands in general, and then we'll kind of dig down from there.
Yeah, and I think we can even drop down from 10,000 feet and say, let's get to where the rubber meets the road.
Let's go.
And that is where the implementation of this law. This is what we are seeing. First of all, as I said, we have two provisions that have been repealed that the president has signed. The 1099 repeal provision for small businesses having to report all transactional work over $600. Unworkable, you couldn't implement it, and the chambers across the country did a tremendous job in helping us get this off the books. The second was the long-term care provisions. It was too unwieldy, you couldn't centralize that, and many of those that do home health and nursing homes worked closely with us. Then we have about 6 provisions that have been delayed. The president wanted to do the employer mandate, the out-of-pocket expenses, the Medicare cuts, and 3 or 4 of the trust funds. And so what they've tried are the slush funds. They've tried to delay those by administrative action. Well, the problem is this is the law. And as so many of you who are in elective office know, you can't just pick and choose what part of the law you're going to enforce today or tomorrow. There has to be predictability, certainty, and consistency, and you are required by the oath you take to implement that law. So what we have done is to say, this is not workable. And here are the reasons that it is not workable. Number one, insurance rates are going up across the board. I have not talked to a single business owner or a single individual who purchases in the individual and small business market who has their insurance cost this year going up less than 23%. 23% is the smallest amount I've heard. I've heard people that have their insurance costs going up over 100%. So that elevated insurance cost is causing a tremendous amount of pressure. I know Delta Airlines, UPS, FedEx, all are companies that have announced they are reducing benefits. The cost is going up. They're dropping spouses. So you're seeing a repositioning and restructuring in this insurance marketplace. Cost in Tennessee, my understanding from Department of Insurance, and Charles, you may have more current numbers than I have, but the estimation in the small business and in individual market is about 70%. Is that correct? Okay. And that is what you're looking at for the pressure. So insurance cost is pressure number one. Number two, the reason it is not workable is because of what it does to undermine the 40-hour work week. And of course, the unions have joined us in opposition to this. People are beginning to hire 30 hours per week and less. 29 and a half hours is becoming a standard. So many of the companies here in Williamson County are saying they are hiring at 29 and a half hours. I've talked to a lot of people who do substitute teaching and are teachers' techs, maintenance crews for school systems. They are being moved to 29 and a half hours. And for our substitute teachers and our teacher techs, you don't only just move school to school to get a full week. You have to go from one school district to another school district so that you don't trigger that. Hospitals, I've been meeting with our hospital management systems and our private act hospitals. That is issue number 3 on why this is not ready. You have a reduction in the rate of reimbursement, both from time and from dollars that are coming into this. You have those RAC audits that are hitting our hospitals, and these RAC audits that were there to try to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, they consider you guilty unless you can prove your innocence. And it is tying up millions of dollars for our hospitals. And for our private act hospitals, this is a very difficult component. You also are looking at physicians who are beginning to change their practices or closing their practices. They said, you know, I've lived through TennCare and the standing up of TennCare, and Obamacare is basically TennCare times 50. And so what they're saying is, I'm just going to go on, I'm 60 years old, I'm 59 years old, I'm going to go on and retire, or I'm going to change my practice model. So we are watching all of that. So the question becomes, what do you do about it? I've got a great bill for all of you to help me with. And Kim Strausel did a great article in the Wall Street Journal on Friday or Saturday about why we need to delay Obamacare. And the legislation that would put this into action is H.R. 2809. And it is a bill that I authored. It delays all taxes, penalties, fees, mandates. It prohibits the Medicaid expansion, which Tennessee has opted out of, thank goodness. And it will prevent the exchange subsidies from getting out of the door. H.R. 2809. Help me send a message to the House Republican leadership. Go to cosponsor.gov. In the search engine, enter 2809 and citizen co-sponsor that bill. That is the first step for getting us to a point where we can delay this bill, and then the second step is defunding the bill. That is H.R. 2862. It is a bill by Tom Graves out of Georgia. So at cosponsor.gov, you can do the same thing. Click on that one. So there is a four-step process for addressing this Obamacare hurdle that is costing us jobs, costing us money, slowing down the economy. I saw Gallup's figures that they expect unemployment to go to 8.9% over the next 6 weeks or so. But you have to delay and defund it, then you have to repeal and replace it.
Perfect segue. The sort of the next question I was going to ask about was the replace it piece to some of the things that are going on right now. And you know, with small businesses, you can deal with cost increases. Some of that's expected, but the unknowns and the uncertainties of this legislation, I think, is what has, at least in my client base, I've seen them kind of just hold back. So they're not investing in their company. They know they're going to have a 23% investment in their company next year just in that healthcare line. So, I mean, it's a big deal for folks. But as we move forward, and let's just, you know, assume for the moment that these efforts are successful in the defund and the repeal, dream a little or help us think a little bit about, you know, what you would replace it with, you know.
And I can give you some specifics, and I'm glad to give you some specifics. Let me start with my legislation for a cross-state line purchase of health insurance. And I know some of you have heard me talk about this until you probably don't want to hear me talk about it anymore. We got it out of committee in 2006 and sent it to the Senate, and the Senate's never, you know, they take a lot of naps over there and don't do a lot of votes. And so this would allow, as Newt Gingrich calls it, the Travelocity concept of health insurance. You could buy what works best for you. And then the insurance company, you would have the protections of the state, consumer protections of the state where the insurance company is domiciled. To sell you that policy in Tennessee, they would have to file with the Tennessee Department of Insurance and pay those fees, and you would have those protections. But it opens up the insurance market. The other thing that it does, which is tremendously important to women, portability. And if you get an insurance policy that you like, you can keep it. And you don't have to constantly be changing insurance companies. So what my legislation would do is to completely repeal Title I of Obamacare, which is the insurance title, and then replace it with the free market model on health insurance, and give individuals more options and let them transport those policies that they have that they like. It would also remove the excise tax that Obamacare has put on insurance policies, and that's I think it's going to be 3.8% is the excise tax. So that is an option right there in the insurance marketplace. Now, we are pulling together, we've had a couple of bills that would do some things comprehensively that everybody knows need to be done. Tort reform, accountabilities for insurance companies, some consumer protections, my across-state modeling, and we are pulling all of this together in one umbrella bill that the Republican Study Committee is going to bring out on, I think it's September 9th. We're going to bring it out. I've been a part of that working group. Phil Rowe, who is a former mayor from up in Johnson City, and he's a member of Congress now, and he has led our working group. We've had Dr. Fleming and Dr. Price and Dr. Cassidy and Dr. Burgess all to be part of this working group. Renee Elmer's out of North Carolina, who's a nurse. And we have crafted a piece of legislation that would be and it's not 2,700 pages, it's 263. So we will have that out there for everyone to say, this is kind of a compilation of a lot of the conservative approach ideas we've had, and yet another alternative for how we would address the problem.
Great.
This is an excellent format to teach people why we probably don't need term limits, because she's been up there long enough to understand things that we never have an opportunity to know about. And I'm fascinated with the depth of knowledge you've got of some of these subjects, Congressman. Going back from the 30,000 down again to the ground level again, particular of interest to me is the energy prices, the persistent high price of gasoline in this country. And given that that's in the purview of your committee, the one thing that I've been, I'd like to hear in general what's going on there, but in specifically with the price of natural gas coming down to a fraction of the price of gasoline and diesel, what's going on that would promote that maybe as a fuel that would help us?
Well, and we're so fortunate here in Williamson County. We have one of the companies that has been a leader in the natural gas-powered vehicles. And I know that they are doing a good bit of work with governmental entities around the country on retrofitting buses and fleet vehicles, things of that nature, with natural gas. And there is a tremendous amount of, and I think Cummins is coming out with an engine that will be a natural gas powered engine. Right. So since we are a logistics state, this is something that holds tremendous promise for us from an economic development tool and a productivity tool, a component of productivity. Some of the things that are specifics to the committee that we are doing that helps with what is now the high price at the pump. Mm-hmm. When I filled up last night, $3.49. Right. And that is a lot of money. And when your mom in the minivan running all of these children to all of these places they have to be, you go through a lot of gallons of gas every day. And what we continue to say is we need an all-of-the-above strategy, which means everything in our hydrocarbons, as well as looking at experimentation for natural gas as a transportation fuel, hydrogen, looking at some of the experimentation there. When it comes to electric power generation, looking at nuclear and new nuclear and some of those components. I was in one of my counties Friday meeting with the some TVA and some of our electric power associations, both our co-ops and our municipal owned. And we were talking about the modular nuclear generators and the work that is being done on those up at Oak Ridge and how this can subsidize and work with our industrial users who are heavier users of electric energy and then be able to sell back to the grid. Plus, it puts some diversification and integration into our grid. This is good Tennessee innovation that can help get the cost of electric power generation and distribution down. So we're continuing to encourage that and want to make certain that any legislation that we do is going to consider all of those components, whether it's wind or solar or nuclear or hydroelectric power generation as a renewable, and then allow in the clean coal technologies, the tar sands. This is why it's important that we build the Keystone Pipeline. The new technologies that are out there allow for a pulling of a hydrocarbon product and refining those tar sands. We also need to look at what is happening with the new drilling capacities. You know, when I was growing up, living in South Mississippi, and a dad that was in the oil industry and selling oil field production equipment, and I would get in the pickup truck and go out with Daddy to deliver a drill bit or something to a rig that was going in. You would see a lot of flares that were going up where they were burning off the natural gas. Now they're capturing and pipelining that and using that product. You would also see wells where maybe there was one here and a mile down the road another one, so they were having different entry points and different roads into sinking these wells. Now what they do is use sonar technology, and they're able to do lateral drills. And North Dakota has been a great example of where they've been environmentally friendly. They have gone in on private lands. They are pulling by the change in the drilling technologies, which I think is absolutely wonderful, because you get to those oil pockets and move them on a lateral basis without having to go in and do as many drills. And I'm sure Steve Smith can tell you, he grew up down in Mississippi too, that there were a lot of areas where you would go in and they had a field, and you would just see pumper after pumper after pumper pulling this out of the land. So it really has changed quite a bit, allowing that. Mm-hmm. That's another component of what can be done. I think the other thing, and let me go on and touch on while we're talking about energy and what we're doing to incentivize, what we need to block. And this is an important thing that we need to block. The out-of-control activist EPA now wants to go from an E10 blend with your ethanol into the gas. They want to go to an E15 and accelerate the amount. This is called the blend wall, and we're bumping up against the blend wall. And I'm one of those that is very much opposed to it. I would like for us to back down the ethanol. I love it when I can go out and buy gasoline that doesn't have ethanol in it. Ethanol is corrosive. It's eating up the fuel lines. You can talk to our auto dealers. They will talk with you about this. They're concerned about what would happen with E15. Go talk to those that are manufacturing boat motors where they're using the E85s, E15s, small motors like lawnmowers. This is a corrosive product, and it is not serving us well. We need to start backing that back down and not elevating it. And the other way that it affects us here in Middle Tennessee is as you put more ethanol into the gasoline, what happens? Your gas mileage is less. You get fewer miles per gallon. And they raise CAFE standards. So this is why you've had problems with some of the auto manufacturing. These CAFE standards are going up. You have to get in your fleet, across the fleet, higher miles per gallon. You cannot do it with a product that is going to burn at such a rate that you get fewer miles per gallon. So you need to halt the CAFE standards. You need to get rid of some of this ethanol and allow people to have a better quality product that will give more miles per gallon if you want to elevate that, if that's your goal.
Lots of moving parts to things that affect us every day, and we appreciate your attention to detail on those, Congressman. Going back to probably the 30,000 foot level just for a moment, and I know Brad and Mad both would probably have some questions about this, but in your presentation at Franklin tomorrow, I noticed a lot of that was about the federal debt, the deficit, taxes, spending, and is there any hope that we're going to see that?
Sure, I think there's hope that, and all of you here in the audience have the handout that we have given these out just to kind of give everybody the facts and figures. I think there's so much on the internet right now, and a lot of it is misinformation. So you have 3 handouts, and we will make certain that we get the digital file to the TV station so that they can have that as people watch the segments. If you look at the handout on the national debt, you will see that we are fast approaching $17 trillion in debt. And this is basically our operational debt. If you put all of our long-term liabilities that exist because of the commitments the federal government has made when they take first right of refusal on your paycheck and take their portion first, and you look at Medicare, Social Security, the obligations that are there, plus the expectation of delivery on entitlements, Medicaid being the largest entitlement, then what you're looking at is an obligated debt of $90 trillion. And many of you have probably heard that figure bannered about in the last few weeks. There's quite a bit of discussion about it. But when we look at what we hold as interagency debt, part of it is held by the Fed. The Fed is monetizing about $85 billion a month now. They're borrowing right now about 38 cents on a dollar that they spend. They're going to taper down to about $75 or $70 billion a month. Not enough for me and you, but they think this is trending the right way. But then there is also a portion of our debt which is sold in the public debt market. And when you look at the right-hand page of your handout, you see who owns our debt. And China is at the top of the list, 1.3 trillion, followed by Japan at 1.2 trillion. Now, look at number 3, OPEC. The cartel owns $266 billion of our debt. $266 billion of our debt, because we are not drilling here, utilizing our natural resources, because we have a flawed Department of Energy and EPA, and it is making it very difficult to extract product, to do discovery for product, extract that product, and then refine that product. Do you realize we have not built a refinery in this country since 1978? There are refineries that have increased their footprint and have remodeled and retooled so that they can do these different boutique fuels and meet seasonal blends. But we have not constructed a refinery. So what are we getting? We're getting money leaving our shores, going to OPEC, buying fuel. OPEC takes their profit and buys our debt. This is not fair to our children and our grandchildren. When you look at the left-hand column, you see that $53,300, that is your share of the debt. Every citizen. You, me, our grandchildren, our children, everybody. That is what you owe. So this is the kind of thing that is capping our children's future. It is trading it to the people that hold our debt. This is why every year, and I know some of you probably think, okay, there she goes again, 1, 2, and 5% across the board spending cuts. I ran them every year I was in the state Senate, ran bills calling for those spending cuts. I was pleased when Governor Bredesen did the across-the-board cut. I think he ended up at 9%. You know, did it by executive order. It's why I think at the federal level we have to continue to make these cuts. Sequestration, 2% across the board cut in that, look at your spending levels, non-discretionary, non-defense discretionary spending. Absolutely, you have to be making these cuts. Our guys at the state level have balanced budget amendments. Our counties have to balance their budget. The federal government goes in and cranks up the printing press. It devalues our dollar. It weakens our trade ability. It strengthens the hand of those that do not wish us well because they are buying our debt. And we've got lots of information on our blackburn.house.gov website on this issue also, but it is what undermines our economy. It undermines jobs growth. It is why we are in such a weakened recovery state, if you will. And certainly here in Middle Tennessee, we're in better shape than a lot of other areas of the country.
Congressman, you've led right into a question that's been on my mind a lot since I helped my son with his macroecon college course here recently. But in honor of Tom Lawrence, who's in the audience here, is your curveball from me this morning anyway. And that is with China, Japan, OPEC, Brazil being the large holders of our U.S. national debt, the level of the dollar doesn't affect me much because I don't travel overseas. Obviously, if a less expensive dollar would make our imports a little higher. But when I asked my son, would you rather pay back all these debts in dollars that are worth $1? Would you rather pay them back in dollars that are worth 75 cents? He chose the latter. Why would we not want to let our dollar devalue some, make us more competitive on our exports, and in turn pay back China with dollars that are worth 75 cents? Well,
China, and let's take China and drill down on that a little bit as a great example with their holding of $1.3 trillion. And you say pay them back with a lesser dollar, whether it's a 75-cent dollar or a 60-cent dollar. But then you've also got to think that's the same dollar that is paying wages and is contributing to a quality of life. You also have to look at the interest rate and what we're spending on interest now, and that is also there on your sheet. And when you consider that we have not yet hit an escalation in interest rates, what are we going to do when that interest rate number is $300 billion or $350 billion? Mm-hmm. And that we're paying a higher rate, even if it is with a more devalued dollar. But here is the thing with China, and this is how our debt becomes a security issue. And Admiral Mullen, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a lot of our veterans know his name well. On July 6, 2010, he said the greatest threat to our nation's security is our nation's debt. Here's why. You take somebody like China that owns that $1.3 trillion, and you look at what we spend every year. We're handing these checks out to China on a daily basis, making that interest payment. With what we're paying them, they can go buy 3 new Joint Strike Fighters every week. Then, at the end of the year, they've got enough money to go buy a brand new shiny aircraft carrier to put these on. So this is why it is a national security issue and why we need to get the amount of debt down, why we need to not be borrowing 38 cents on a dollar, why a stronger dollar is going to help us from a lot, whether it's energy, whether it is national security, whether it is having a lower interest rate. So we do need to be mindful of that and where we are placing those dollars. And then having a stronger dollar, I don't think I would rather have a stronger dollar. I'll just say it that way.
Fair answer. Gentlemen?
Yeah. Congressman, you mentioned earlier that, and I guess as an economic developer, one of the most troubling things would be any sort of legislation that undermines a 40-hour work week.
Yes.
And an 8.9% unemployment rate anywhere in this country is completely unacceptable. So it sounds like this is the difference of when you write a law in theory and then you apply it in reality.
Absolutely.
All that being said, my question is, to get us back a little higher, what's it like to work with this administration? And the second part, what's the biggest difference between working with this administration and the ones you worked with in the past?
Yeah, and when you look at the application, I think that I can sum that question up best, Matt, in an oversight hearing we were doing with the EPA administrator, Lisa Jackson. And I asked her a question about cost-benefit analysis, because in my 19 counties in the 7th Congressional District, and in businesses that many of you own, whether you're in manufacturing, you're in painting, you're in coating, so many different things that are actually made here in the USA. Everybody looks at cost-benefit analysis, and I'll be walking through these factories and through these plants and looking at books with our employers, and they will say, this is what this regulation is doing to me, this is what it's going to cost us in compliance, and this is how it's going to change my prices, and this is how it affects me when I'm competing against something being manufactured in China or India, because they're sourcing in, they are a component part into a larger item. And so I asked her, I said, tell me how cost-benefit analysis weighs into your decision of what rules you make. And by the way, the Federal Register carried 80,000 pages of new rules last year. 80,000. So, and she said, it is not a consideration. So when you have an administration, whether it's the Environmental Protection Agency or the Federal Communications Commission or the Food and Drug Administration or any number of the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies, and by the way, they have an app for all these agency acronyms, and they're not doing cost-benefit analysis, they're focused on the outcome, what they want it to be, then it is impossible for anybody to ever comply, because that's what, Brad mentioned the need for certainty and consistency, and you don't get it out of this administration because they change the rules. Go talk to any of our hospitals. They will tell you on Friday afternoons about 4 o'clock, CMS, Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, and Health and Human Services, HHS, send out rule changes on Friday at 4 o'clock. They do them by email, and most of these rule changes say they are effective immediately. So they end up working, your compliance offices end up working through the weekend to change all of this to meet their compliance schedule. And it is impossible. I have one hospital in my district, 100 beds. They got 30 rule changes within a given, I think it was like a 6-week period of time. And this makes it very difficult. So that the fact that the big difference is previously, when working with the Bush administration or when I was in the state Senate and we would be working on issues, when we got an answer from Washington, we knew fairly much that's where it stood. And you could expect that a year, 18 months, you could plan a little bit more in the long range. Now there is such a high degree of uncertainty that business owners or individuals that are trying to do new start businesses will come to us with questions about rules and regulations because they cannot get a firm answer. And the lack of the ability to give a firm answer from these agencies, because they're so focused on the outcome and so focused on being certain they have the ability to control what happens in Tennessee or Kentucky or Alabama or North Dakota or wherever, it makes it almost impossible to do a business plan or for our publicly traded companies to do shareholder meetings with certainty. There are too many moving parts.
Right. Brad?
Got
Another one?
One more, I guess. We'll see. Last week, I think it was, we had Dr. Art Laffer speak before the chamber membership, and I think he does a great job of kind of.
He's a great friend, and we love having. He came here because there was a state income tax battle
That's exactly
that the
right.
citizens of this state won.
And he speaks about that every time I've
Every
heard him
time.
talk. So
A lot of help from our state senator back then, too.
Yeah, that's right.
being he's the father of supply side economics, and and he talked about cutting taxes, cutting spending. That's the way that you can
That's right.
increase the overall economic health. And he goes on to talk about voting for Bill Clinton twice, because he had good economic policy, and then described other things. But I think he seems to think like a lot of my clients and a lot of our chamber members, and that is they are in existence to make a profit.
Right.
Government is not in the business to make a profit. However, to repay debt, put my banker hat on, it comes from surplus. It comes from that net income and cash flow. How do we switch that, and what can small business owners do to help change some of that mentality of kind of operating the government more like you would a business, particularly during this time when you've got to reduce debt?
Right, and I wish there were more individuals in Washington, and this goes back to Matt's first question about the philosophical difference. Those of us that, like Dave and I, we cut our teeth out knocking on doors, working 80 hours a week. We had a work ethic, and we were determined to be able to pay our way through school. And so you have that, let's solve this problem, and let's do it in a way that's going to benefit a large number of people. And making that profit, and small businesses can help us with driving this message by educating their customers. And that they have to, in order to keep the doors open, realize a profit. Wage increases come from realizing a profit. R&D comes from realizing a profit. Business expansion, jobs growth, all of these components only happen when people are making a profit and feel that within a predetermined period of time they can make X amount of profit and therefore receive a certain yield, and then be able to use that to diversify their business in a given way. Yeah. And so this is it's one of the necessities that are out there, and I think the more the American people realize that that businesses that they're walking past every day and people that they know and interface with every day are having a very difficult time making that profit and keeping those doors open, the more they're going to appreciate that.
Yeah, agreed.
Very good. I want to apologize to our audience this morning for not leaving more time for questions for the audience, but we do have time for one or two if anybody would like to step up and ask the congressman a question. We've got a couple of other things I could easily fill the time up. Go ahead and come up and tell us who you are and
my name's John Newell. I've just moved into the area and want to just also
step up to the microphone, if
Right
you will, right here in front of you.
right here.
Back
Right,
this way.
right here at the podium.
Okay, sorry. My name's John Newell. Just moved into the area from Potomac, Maryland, and want to place a plug to Brad, who helped me move some money out here to close on a house. Very consumer friendly. Thank you very much, Brad, for that. Go to Pinnacle. My question is this. I've taught at the Naval Academy for a while and wrote some papers for a leadership conference we had on the very issue you talked about as the debt for the national security issue. My question is, the Brits had to go to a third party to get this solved.
Right.
And where is the sensible center? You're very positive, and you've got to be positive despite the environment that's there. But the gross debt to GDP ratio, which is really what's the measure of our
106.
debt capacity, has
Right.
continued to go up. And when you look at those projections, economic growth is the key. But also there's a feedback loop, and that is when your debt to GDP ratio gets to be above 90%. You point out it's 100%. You pay a price in terms of the ability of the economy to regenerate itself in the inevitable ups and downs of capitalism, and the natural rate of growth decreases. So we're in a devolving negative cycle. What can we do to get the word out to people that there's an overhang of threat here that will bring the whole temple down on our necks? You know?
Yeah, and that is a great question. And Mr. Newble, I have to tell you, I have not met you, but I was watching your responses, and I thought he must be a veteran. And I'm pleased to know that you taught at the Naval Academy and that you've done some work on this, because, you know, as he references, we're empowering our enemies and with the debt to GDP. And I think that what we have to do on getting the message out, I like to say it is the network of you, the YOU. It is the most powerful network right now. I would imagine that everybody in here gets a litany of emails every day from people saying, is this true? What do you know about this issue, this, that, and the other? And it's one of the reasons I've done fact-based, sourced sheets for all of my listening sessions and meetings, because I think people want to know where to find this information. So my suggestion would be taking your email address book. Sign up for my email newsletter that I do every week. And I put links, sources, referencing all in these, and send this out to people. This is sourced, it is fact-checked, people that are in your list, and help educate them as to what is happening with this economy. Because as you mentioned, we're in this negative rotation. As you see on your sheet, we're at 106% of GDP. Now the problem we've got is this. As people are not putting money, they're sitting on money, and they're not exercising capital investment. That's where your new jobs come from. People have to put that capital forward. If they are not putting that capital forward to expand, grow, or start, seed new businesses, you are not going to have the jobs growth with higher wages that you're going to need. So as people sit this out, waiting to see what is going to happen with the economy, you're right. We're going to see fewer jobs, less jobs growth. The unemployment number is going to be stagnant or rise. And I think it is so helpful, just tagging on to this, is having people understand the U6 number on jobs and unemployment with the short-term unemployed and underemployed, and then also the statistical alternative number, which is about 20%. You may have more accuracy. That is your long-term and underemployed. And looking at those numbers and thinking, what is causing this to happen? There are a few things. It is uncertainty from the federal government. It is the cost of the energy. It is the uncertainty of Obamacare that is out there. It is a lack of trust or confidence, if you will, in how this administration is handling our foreign policy. And those are the items that seem to be putting that pall of uncertainty over our economy and over those that have the ability to do new starts in R&D from doing it, or R&D not doing it here in the U.S., doing it somewhere else on the globe.
Well, we are nearly out of time, and I just want to say thanks again to our congressman for being here.
Happy to.
Marcia,
Thank you.
that was an interesting, and we appreciate the depth that we're able to get into here, and just appreciate your depth of knowledge on all those issues. Brad, Matt, thank you for helping, and we appreciate those of you in our audience this morning for being with us, and wish we could have had time for all of us to ask a few questions. I had a dozen more I could have asked, and I know how it feels. Tentatively, we've scheduled our next show for September 23rd, And we're in discussions with Mayor Moore and Eric Stuckey, the city administrator at the city of Franklin, and looking to do a show that explores the growth in Franklin, where it's going, and what to expect over the next few years from our city here. Hope to do one maybe in the next couple of months with the city of Brentwood, and hopefully find out a little bit more about what those cities see in terms of growth and development in their borders. So we hope to see you back again next month, and if you will, give us feedback and help us make the show better. Anything we can do that you can see would improve it, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again next month.